Hey guys, so I've been watching this video by Peter Lindemann, who was showing how to make a dynamometer for an electric motor, and I want to discuss this. We're going to play this a little bit.
There's almost no deflection on the front frame and about 700 grams on the back. You can see how much it's pulled the back spring down and how much it's relieving. This one is still sitting basically at zero. Okay, so let's take some measurements and see what we get.
So he's going to measure the deflection, and then he's going to measure the volts and the amps.
Spring scales on.
And
you can see where I've got them holding them both with one hand. And I've got the tachometer here.
so he's using a pony brake there, which is my friend Stephen Hartman in Germany suggested that I use a pony brake. And he has, I guess that's a DC motor maybe.
Like that. There's my readings.
So he's measuring the volts and the amps, and then how much actual torque deflection he's getting.
At 1868, I have a deflection on the scales of 700 grams. There's my readings before my strap gets too hot, like a burn. So you have to take all four measurements simultaneously.
It says you got to take all four measurements simultaneously, and here's where he goes wrong.
Okay.
Because that blanket statement, 1 horsepower equals 746 watts. Well, that might be true for the average electric motor, but it's not true for all electric motors. So in this case, he's using 84 watts. But he's saying, okay, so 1 horsepower equals 746 watts, so how many horsepower do I have? No, where are you coming up with this 1 horsepower equals 746 watts? That's not a constant. That depends on the motor. You could have a 1 horsepower motor that only uses 20 watts of power. You could have a 1 horsepower motor that requires 5,000 watts of power to get 1 horsepower out of it. You could have a motor that wastes energy and gets super hot and glows and puts out all kind of heat and only has like a quarter horse, even though it's using 10,000 watts of power. You could easily do that. Just make it waste power. That's what they do. And you could make a really efficient motor that only uses 500 watts to get 1 horsepower. The formula, that blanket statement just simply doesn't, that's not right. Where are you coming up with 1 horsepower equals 746 watts? That is not a constant. The actual torque depends on the strength of the magnets used, and also, due to the Joe Newman effect, it's going to depend on the actual field strength, the actual inductance, the level of inductance and the resistance. So the higher the resistance, the less current's going to go through there, but the higher the inductance, the greater the field strength. So it's going to use less power and actually have more torque. So you could actually say 2 horsepower equals 300 watts. Okay? Or you could say 4 horsepower equals 100 watts. That's the way it works. This is a lie. That blanket statement right there, that 1 horsepower equals 746 watts, it come off of some chart that some oil company engineer come up with a long time ago and said, okay, all electric motors this. You can't make a blanket statement of all electric motors. So now I'm going to show you what I'm talking about here. We're going to take this, we're going to go in this other room. This old, there's my old computer and equipment here. Here's my electric bike that people see me riding around on. Here's this big motor right here. Okay. Now this drill, now you know if I leave this running for any length of time, that battery is going to run down. Okay? But we're going to plug it onto this big motor. the same battery, the bigger the motor, the less current it uses. This is what Joe Newman proved. The bigger the motor, the stronger the magnets, the longer the wire, the less power it actually uses. And they don't want to hear that. The engineers will fight you. They'll argue. They'll say it's impossible. They say it's over unity or this or that. You can't have a free lunch and all these other excuses they try to make for why it's not possible. They did the same thing when cold fusion was coming out that they did to Joe Newman. Alright, so I think I got this plugged in now. This is the same battery that come out of this. And apologize, lighting isn't very good in here, but you can see this is a very large motor. And it's just a big, large rotor. And there's a single secondary coil there. I'm going to turn this on now. speed controller. Ice cold. That doesn't burn me. It doesn't hurt. Put my finger right on there. Well, it finally dropped down a little bit. Alright. Okay. So, you can put a pony brake on that and measure it all you want, and it'll tell you, you know, it has this many grams of force or that, you know what, it has so much torque. But you can't say, well, it has this much horsepower and then turn it around. You have to measure the horse to see what actual horsepower is and compare it to the torque of the motor. Then you could turn around and say, oh, well, this is how many watts we know it's using. All you gotta do is measure the watts it's using and say this is how much power it has out. But you can't do it with a formula. The formula is not going to, there's no set rule that so many watts equals so many horsepower. There's no way that this motor can be using more than maybe 50 watts at the most. It's using way less current than the drill. The drill would have run down already, and it's stronger than the drill without a gearbox. And the time's messed up. It could go faster, but the flywheel effect on there is what's slowing that down. That's why I'll argue with a guy on there something about flywheels. Yeah, flywheel's great for storing up energy, but they take forever to build up speed. That's why this thing is so slow. That's why Joe Newman's giant motors were so slow, because of the size. It has nothing to do with the transformer, the transformations of current and voltage, because you're adding power to the system. There's no set formula is what I'm trying to say. So this is a very convincing demonstration too, but I've done just enough experiments to know you can make a motor that drinks current and it gets super hot and it uses a whole lot of watts. You could have a 1,000-watt motor that only puts out a fraction of a horsepower. And you could have a 100-watt motor that puts out 10 horsepower. I mean, this is the kind of thing that Joe Newman was doing. He was using 9-volt batteries and driving around a car, you know, off of little 9-volt batteries. So there's a new physics going on. There's free energy that's coming out of the vacuum. It's coming from the quantum field, or it's coming from the nuclear force of the magnets themselves. It's coming from basically like cold fusion. You're having electrons that are getting heavier. You're having like electron avalanche, or electrons are actually getting heavier, or you're getting more electrons coming in from the aether. There's so many different potential explanations. I have my own personal theories. I kind of like the muon, gluon, or whatever, where the electrons are actually getting heavier because their speed is basically just agreement with Einstein's law. Basically Einstein's law, the theory of relativity. But basically, as these electrons are being accelerated, that they would get heavier and they would therefore have more energy. But if particles don't actually exist, then you just have to switch to, it's all just quantum information. You can't even really look at it as particles. It's just the information of the energy that's traveling, and it's not even really traveling maybe through the wire. Like this could actually just be information like a wave or packets of information traveling over the surface of it. But those details don't even really matter. All it really matters is getting your formula right to know, hey, I need a motor that, you have to reverse engineer it. You can't go with the old formulas. I've got antique books here that show where I've figured out where they went wrong. I've gone back and looked, and I've looked at I've got some really old books on motors and batteries, and I've built so many motors like this other motor here, and I think we finally figured out at least part of the problem is that we're relying on old information that's incorrect. It's old, bad information. We have to switch to the new information and switch to the new physics, and we just have to rewrite the formulas and say, okay, it's not just this set. You can't just put in this set formula of 1 horsepower equals 748 watts or whatever. You're gonna have to say 1 horsepower equals total wattage times total field strength times, there's actually several other factors involved, and so we're just gonna have to write a book on this. Aside from the other things I'm trying to do. I'm trying to raise money just to feed my cat and so I can live and survive. I'm trying to make a living doing this, but I would like to get patents and maybe sell motors and this and that. But at the same time, this information, it shouldn't just die with the inventor like what Joe Newman was doing. That information shouldn't die with him, and the things that I'm doing shouldn't die when I finally leave this earth. So I'm going to write a book on what I'm doing, and we're going to open source a lot of this. But this was just one of the first experimental motors, and there's really not any different than this is just a series motor. It's just a series DC motor is all this really is. But I do have multiple brushes on here. There's very high inductance on there. The total resistance is maybe not all that great, but the counter EMF is phenomenal, and it's using the counter EMF as a pro-motive force. So the counter voltage is actually a pro-motive force. So it's not counter electromotive force, it's simply counter current. But the counter current has been inverted and applied towards the forward motion. That's why it seems to be twice as powerful as this motor. The little motor that's in here, I've opened up a lot of these drills and looked at these motors, and the problem is just basically there's several problems. There's a whole host of problems that have been built in over the last 100 years. The electric motor has not changed in 100 years, and it's a deliberate conspiracy in my opinion. But they knew about lithium-ion technology. They knew that lithium was a catalyst for cold fusion 100 years ago. In 1916, the Edison company was using lithium. They call it lithium salts, but it's basically lithium hydroxide or hydride. Lithium hydride, same as the lithium-ion batteries that they're making. Same as what the Rossi patent is doing with the cold fusion patent down in Florida, Leonardo Corporation. Lithium, that's the secret, people that are buying into the lithium, good for you. If I had some money, I'd maybe invest in a lithium mine, but it's not just lithium though. See, lithium is maybe the catalyst for hydrogen reactions and for that particular, the Rho 10 series of elements on the periodic table. But we don't know what other catalysts and what other metals and what other types of these unknown nuclear reactions might occur. We don't know with the magnet power how that's really, what it really is. We don't even really understand what magnetism is. I think it's just a reflection of the strong nuclear force, and I think that gravity is just a reflection of electricity. I think gravity and electricity are one and the same, and they're just a reflection of the weak nuclear force. That there's basically just those two fundamental forces. And but I have a lot of theories that are highly unorthodox. But I got these motors to work simply by doing exactly the opposite of what I was told to do. Just refusing to accept the dogma and basically just said no. You could call these bad boy motors. I said, hey, my teachers were lying about this, and then my teachers were lying about that. Well, maybe my teachers were lying about the motors, or even if they didn't realize they were lying, they've simply been misinformed. Over the last 100 years, we've been misinformed by the coal companies, the oil companies, the car companies. If you sell somebody a free energy car, they'll never come. You lost your customer. They're not going to come back, and they won't have to buy gas. They won't have to buy oil. They won't even need you to come repair the car if you make it so good that it'll never break down. So that's the utopian idea of the free energy. Everybody's just totally free and has their free power and everything. That's the way it should be. How we get there, I'm not sure, because we have systems of power and control. Everybody's dependent on everybody else. We really are all kind of just like being Jesus for each other. That's why I got a picture of Jesus on the, and it looks like UFO Jesus is one of my favorite YouTubers. But the free energy stuff is real, y'all. They're suppressing it. We're all suppressing it somehow. Like, I'm holding out for money is why I'm not telling all the little details. But at the same time, the science is just not. It's been totally suppressed from the highest levels, like MIT, when the Martin Fleischmann thing come out, and the Pons and Fleischmann at the University of Utah, and they discovered the cold fusion. They realized that the things were being suppressed like this. They probably seen other people had their research just get killed, so they decided to go straight to the press and say, look, these things are real. What the big universities are doing, they're just holding out for the big funding, and they never gonna, there's no motive to actually get the fusion power to work if you're just milking taxpayers' money and just living off of the state. See. So there's no incentive to get your fusion thing to work, the hot fusion. So the hot fusion people were the ones who really were fighting against the cold fusion. And of course it's the oil companies and the coal companies, the energy brokers, who are fighting against the free energy, because the whole grid system, if you had devices, if your computer comes with a battery built in, it just picks up free energy out of the air, or it gets powered off of the Wi-Fi that's sending data anyways. Like, you're getting data and power right through the air. It's totally possible. Tesla proved it 100 years ago. Wasn't so much free energy; it was broadcast energy. Yeah, someone still has to do the work, or run the generator, or keep the solar panels clean, or stop polluting the skies so the sun will come out and get the solar panels to work. But the energy could be broadcast through the air, so that your device literally just comes with its own power, and that threatens the grid system. Just like the cell phones, the landline just vanished almost overnight. And I think I think that the free energy technology could eventually do the same thing for the grid, and that might be a good thing too, because the grid is highly vulnerable. But what about our satellites that transmit the data and everything? They're still vulnerable to a solar flare or something like that. Those are the things that we really need to be worried about, is just the security of the future, the whole system of civilization and information in the future. They shouldn't worry so much about power or letting people have more freedom. They should worry about just simply, the collapse of our systems of comfort. That's the thing. Everybody wants to be comfort. They want to have comfortable. They want to have their electricity. They want to have their lights. They want to have their TV and movies. They want to be connected. They want to have their cell phones to keep running. So if the grid goes down, that threatens all of that. And I think decentralized power with the free energy, solar panels, broadcast electricity. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are still going to be tied to the old system, and poor people, you know, like myself, I might always have to sort of depend on the state, because I feel like I lived my life. I really put in a lot of work and paid taxes for years and years, and now that I'm not really able to work or keep a job, you know, because I'm insane, obviously, I think I've discovered some free energy stuff. And also, I've somehow convinced myself that I'm John Gay, the guy that invented virtual reality 30 years ago, US Patent number 5394029. You go around telling people, hey, I invented virtual reality, and they suppressed it. You ain't going to get a job like that. They're, oh, he's a crazy bike guy. He thinks he invented virtual reality. You know, all I can do is say, well, you know, go look it up. But even that doesn't really do any good anymore. If no one knows you, you can't just walk in and say, hey, you know, I'm the guy. I'm trying to tell you that this is real. You know, so, well, I guess that's all I got to say on this one. Maybe plug this in again and just show it off some more. I just don't really know what to do with this motor anymore, except keep filming it. And yeah, we'll put a pony brake on there, and we'll try to measure how much actual turning force it has. But so then we have to look at the watts used, the total watts used. The problem with measuring total watts used is everything I've used to try to measure the current going into this device has been fried. Like every type of ammeter and voltmeter that I've put on here, every multi-tester, and the analog meters just don't do anything when they're hooked on here. I think that speed controller keeps coming loose on me.